Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Melanin Margin, the weekly chat show where conversations about race are never off the table. We're your hosts, Quaviondre Williams.
And Daquon Wilson.
So let's get into this week's conversation. What's on the table this week?
For as long as we could remember, gender has been black and white, boy and girl, and nothing in between. However, as we gain more life experience, we find that these restrictive ideals are not as clear cut as they may seem. So, Andre, I wanted to ask you, what was your first experience with exploring your gender?
So, for me, one of the first unconscious experiences with exploring gender is one I think that many people can relate to, which is Halloween. The one day of the year where you can dress up in elaborate clothing without anyone thinking that you're weird or strange. Of course, there were still limitations. Like, I could never dress up as a feminine presenting fictional character growing up, but it was the one day of the year where I could toe the line a little bit. However, one of my first conscious experiences exploring gender was during, you guessed it, theater. I know, big shocker, right?
Groundbreaking, never been seen before.
But I think that one of the main reasons that theater is so integral to many LGBTQIA persons' lives is because it's one of the few places in the world where you were encouraged to be unique, you know? And during freshman year, I was playing a role in a musical that required me to wear makeup. Since no one could do it for me, I came to my mom, who is a beautician, and asked her to teach me how to do it myself. She showed me once, and after one stumble, I picked up the basics fairly quickly. I enjoyed it so much that I asked her if I could wear it to school, and she said, absolutely the fuck not. So I asked her if I could just wear it at home, and she said no to that too. Then I decided that if I couldn't wear it, I would just practice my makeup skills with my little sister. And I'll never forget this memory. I'd just done my sister's makeup, concealer, foundation, contour, highlights. I mean, the whole shebang, Daquon. I went to show my mom the look, and she burst out laughing, saying that I made my sister look like she was dead. And I swiftly packed up my mom's kit, washed off my sister's face, and never touched makeup again. And as an adult, I get why she did it. It was a different time, and she still hadn't fully wrapped her head around me being gay at the time. But it doesn't change the hurt, though. And it doesn't change the fact that growing up, every time I thought about trying makeup, that memory was the first thing that came up. And even though it happened so long ago, as an adult, I don't have the same interest I had in makeup back then. I wonder how things, would have turned out had she encouraged me instead. I mean, I still don't think it would have been my passion, but maybe it could have been like, a lucrative side hustle, but who knows? But what about you, Daquan?
For me, it really started unconsciously at a young age. Like, I had that stereotypical experience of being that little kid that used to, put on their mom's wigs and dress around in heels and dance around the house. Mary J. Blige's "Just Fine" was my jam. I would be going in with an 8 count and everything. You couldn't tell me nothing. And at the time, it wasn't really seen as nothing because it was just a kid having fun. But as I got older, it kind of started getting frowned upon and not something to be done because there came that prejudice against like being gay or any type of gender variation other than being a cishet man. And I really stopped exploring my gender. And it wasn't until college that I actively and consciously started doing things to kind of breach the mold a little bit. It started out small, like I would paint my nails, and I just had fun doing it because it was something where I could literally just spend time with myself, take the time to paint the nails, and it was therapeutic. Um, and then, of course, it started moving on to wearing press on sometimes. And then when my parents saw it, of course, it was like, why are you doing that? Like, why do you need this? Why waste your money on this?
Mm,
And it kind of just like made me stay in the background a little bit with how I did it. I still painted my nails. That was still something I was going to do, but maybe not as much when I'm at home, or maybe like a more neutral color. But then my junior year of college, like right as the pandemic was starting, that's when I started to get into makeup, and that's when it finally just like clicked. Everything
mhm,
really clicked for me about how I was feeling gender wise. Like I've always had some type of feeling that it was not enough. I was like, okay, I'm gay. I'm like a gay feminine man. Like that's it. But there was still something that I didn't quite know yet. But doing makeup and kind of exploring my gender that way really helped me push towards that language of non-binary, which I think is also a great question to ask. So, Andre, how did you come into the language of non-binary?
Um, I came into the language of being non-binary fairly recently, like within the past 2 years or so, I want to say. When I left home and stepped into the world as an adult, I was finally able to look at what I wanted from my life without the pressure of my parents or family weighing on me. I was able to explore my identity, my sexuality, and unpack many of the preconceived notions about what both of these things meant. The idea of in betweens never really factored in before. Like you, Daquon, I identified as a gay black man for the longest time because I thought that these were the only boxes that existed, and anything else was, as many toxic people told me, quote unquote, too complicated. But when I was able to look at myself, really, really look at myself, I've always known my identity was not anywhere near as simple as everyone was telling me it was. Like, I knew I liked men, but I also knew that I didn't care what genitals they had. I also knew that there were some cis women that I was attracted to, but only ones who possessed a certain level of masculinity. And then there was the fact that I was attracted to masculine and feminine people who didn't identify with either gender. And then there was my identity. Like, I knew that I was okay with the genitals that I have, but also I knew that I didn't really feel like a man. I thought for a long time that I may have been a trans woman, but I didn't identify with being called a woman, a wife, or a girlfriend. But being called a man or a husband or a boyfriend wasn't giving what it needed to give. So I did the whole, Googling thing. And I came to the conclusion that I was actually and am actually a pansexual, non binary person who uses she, her pronouns. And once I knew this, it was so liberating. But it also helped me understand something else too. Like, terminology isn't really for everyone else. I mean, it can be a useful descriptor, if someone is open to receiving it, but it's really there to help some of us identify who we are. Knowledge empowers you. And when I had the word to describe the typhoon of what I thought were internal contradictions, everything clicked. The wave settled and it brought me a different level of clarity that I've never had before in my life. And now that I have it, it's helped me grow as a person by breaking down those societal norms that have been so ingrained in me since I was a child because I opened my mind. I could think more freely, and that helped me grasp the concept of, intersectionality in a deeper, more empathetic way. But what about you, Daquan? When did you know?
I think for me, it kind of started in college, just like everything. Growing up, I didn't know anybody who identified as non binary, and it wasn't really something that was spoken of. The most I knew was like either you're a man or you're a woman, or sometimes there's trans people, but I also didn't know a lot about that because, of course, I didn't have any trans people that I knew personally in my life or knew of at the time. So it wasn't until college when I remember orientation, we would go around and say pronouns. And even that was something very new to me because in high school, nobody was like, oh, my name is so and so, and I go by these pronouns. Like, nobody was doing that. And so
Yeah.
that was a new experience for me that really had to start the process of kind of unpacking gender and being introduced to people who don't just go by he him pronouns and don't just go by she her, but they them he they and everything else. And so, like I said before, it was as I was exploring my gender with makeup that I kind of started to get this idea of being non-binary, because I remember actually meeting people who were non-binary and kind of talking to them and how they experienced their gender. And it really struck a light bulb moment for me of like, oh, like I've been going through similar things, or I've had similar
Hmm.
thoughts. And so, I started exploring with pronouns. I started move from using he him to he they, and just like really trying to think about what is going on in my gender identity, because I didn't have the language for it a lot of the times. And then I really resonated with just being queer and non-binary and being somewhat gender fluid, and
Yeah.
that aspect of like not having to fit in one box or the other was the biggest liberatory feeling ever, because it was like all my life I felt like I had to be this type of person. If I wasn't a man, then I wanted to be a woman, but I didn't want to be a woman. And so it was
Hmm.
something that I could not grasp, but having the language and feeling liberated to step out of the gender binary was uh something that just like blew my mind, honestly. It was like, wow, like I like how this feels, and started introducing my pronouns to other people, and hearing them use those pronouns for me was also very validating and just affirming. And so it started something in me where I was like, wow, like I'm finally feeling what I wanted to feel this entire time.